So let's finish up with kind of the big picture summary of everything we've been covering in this chapter, and hopefully tying up this unit, I should say, part one, and hopefully tying up a few loose ends and maybe making some connections that you didn't quite pick up on. So the real long-term legacy of the Chicago World's Fair, which is it's more than simply a really cool cultural event in the city of Chicago. It's really a defining moment in America. It's a change in everything in terms of domestic approaches to things and in terms of foreign policy and in terms of how it is that we view ourselves and how others view us. The real big takeaway out of the Chicago World's Fair is the concept of American exceptionalism. This idea that there is just something very special about America, America's culture, and America's people that transcends race or background or religion or anything else. That in America, there is this sense of free market opportunity and entrepreneurial spirit that provides a chance and an opportunity for anybody of any background to succeed and flourish if they're willing to work for it. Despite the way that society may look right now, America is at its heart a very, very tolerant and patient nation. We will accept anybody provided that you are here and you are following the rules and that you are doing everything that you're supposed to be doing legally, and ideally that you're here legally. But even still, if you're following the rules and trying to fit into American culture, we are very, very tolerant of people. Um, and it's this sort of toleration that leads to the opportunity to work and become the best version of who you are and what you're capable of doing. This is one reason why we looked at two non-Native American-born entrepreneur millionaires when we were doing our millionaire projects, because I felt it was really important to sort of get this idea that these men were immigrants who came to America and they became some of the wealthiest people of their era. Now, along with this, there is this true sense that somehow or another America has now, you know, the Philadelphia World Expo showed off that we could do some really cool stuff and that we were capable economically of being a major player on the world stage. But now we didn't just show economically what we could do. We showed that there was this innovation and this spirit in America that was just not found anywhere else. And that meant that it was time now to recognize that America had something to contribute. And it's time for America to step up and wear the big boy pants. And what does that mean? Well, that's a good question because people really aren't sure. But it was a time to look at what it was that other great countries did and what should then America be doing. Now, secondarily, there is this idea of innovation. Every city that has come since the 1893 World's Fair has used the White City and how it was planned and designed as the model or template for what they need to do in terms of its ability to deal with sanitation, water purification and access, electricity, sewage and waste disposal, resource allocation, this blending of natural environment with urban environment. All of these things are a result of the way that the White City was. There is the very real fact, too, that the modern sense of recycling and resource use and basically reduce, reuse, recycle, repurpose,
Leah
that,
Matthew, you're right. It's on the lower level. Leah to the lower level, please. Thank you.
sorry, that came out of the 1893 World Expo. The fact that we have sprinklers in our buildings, that we use AC power, that um, we can process as much sewage as we do, we can deal with garbage to the degree that we do. All of these things came out of the World's Fair. It does, in a tertiary sense, that be on the third part here, it also does highlight the fact that for good or bad, America is a very consumer based culture. We use and we consume and we spend. Americans are obsessed with this escapism, this idea that even for a brief moment, we can leave reality behind and really escape to someplace new and bold and different than the humdrum of what we deal with on an everyday level. It's also really an indication of the obsession that we have with recreation, amusement, entertainment. Every major amusement park and theme park can be traced back to the Midway and what Saul Bloom did. Even if you look at like State Fair, you have Spin City, the big like amusement area. If you look, it says Spin City on the Midway. The word Midway comes to indicate an area of amusement and enjoyment. One of the people at the 1893 World Expo was the father of Walt Disney. And he went home and told young Walter about his experiences. And when Walt decided to build the Magic Kingdom, he based it on the White City and the Midway. Epcot is set up just like the Midway is. There was an explosion of amusement parks after this fair because the realization that there was a market for it in America. It's also really an indicator of the fact that as Americans, we are obsessed with convenience. We want it now. We don't want to wait. We don't want to have to deal with being patient. We want what we want when we want it. That's why we consume so much fast food. That's why we want mass produced items, and that's why we want availability, because we don't like to wait. This is also why we have debt, because we're willing to buy even if we don't have money necessarily. Which leads us to the last part here, which is the sort of unavoidable fact that there are some very stark contrasts at play. On the one hand, you have people at the White City who are walking around the World's Fair, who are experiencing this idea of a perfect future and what it'll look like, and just overwhelmed and awestruck by everything. Only like 6 miles away, in a suburb, there's a dude who may have killed up to 200 women or 300 women. While everybody at the fair is walking around spending money, enjoying things, and experiencing life to the fullest, America is in the middle of the worst economic crisis in its entire history. Going back for a moment to the whole discovery of H.H. Holmes in the aftermath of the fair, the police chief in Chicago went to Europe the following year, and he helped establish an organization called the International Federation of Police Investigators. And their purpose was to begin applying logic, scientific methodology, and critical thinking to crime. Because here's the thing, people were scared in the 1880s of Jack the Ripper, the serial killer in England. the first modern recorded serial killer. And Americans were terrified, but they were at least consoled by the fact that that would not happen in America. And you're right. What happened instead was a guy who was maybe infinitely more terrifying and made all the more frightening because he did it in the suburbs, basically. And he did it in a very high profile way as a very prominent person that everybody was aware of and had a fairly large, devoted group of admirers. And yet none of them saw this going on. The days of police work being you kick in the door and you beat somebody till they give you a confession are gone. Now, the police are going to need to apply scientific principle. They're going to need to apply inductive and deductive reasoning. They're going to have to apply logic. They're going to have to actually change how the police work is done. And last but not least, America, while this great spectacle of the fair was going on, is in the midst of its worst economic crisis in history. And within a week of the fair being over, you have mass unemployment and a return to the way it was before. And it really just continues to highlight that the fair was escapist and it was about amusements. And when you separated that out, it was a way to get away from the problems. And when the fair is gone, the problems just come back, including the murder of the mayor of Chicago in broad daylight, including 100,000 people. That's roughly 20 to 25% of employable age Chicagoans out of a job overnight. I, I still, you know, I still step back and wonder how it is that we walked out of like the biggest party in history back into the reality of how bad things really were. But at the same time, I look and realize that when we did that, at least 130 years ago, we rolled up our sleeves and decided to fix it and make it better. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Peace and love.